I never imagined that my life would turn into a nightmare so quickly. One moment, I was trying to navigate my new reality after the accident that left me paralyzed, and the next, I was facing cruelty I didn't know existed. My husband's family, who I thought would be supportive, revealed their true colors the day I became dependent on others. Instead of offering care or compassion, they treated me like a burden, an obstacle to their plans, and the one thing I couldn't defend myself against at the time, my vulnerability, was what they used against me. It started subtly at first. Small remarks, almost casual, about how helpless I had become. They spoke as if I were already a shadow of my former self, as if my worth had evaporated the moment I couldn't walk. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that perhaps stress and worry made them act harshly. But one winter morning, the pretense shattered. I was in the living room, bundled in blankets, when they decided I had overstayed my welcome. My husband barely looked at me, lost in some private frustration I would never understand, and his family began whispering about how this situation had become too costly and inconvenient. Before I could react, they literally took matters into their own hands. They bundled me up, lifted me into a wheelchair, and wheeled me outside. The blizzard was fierce that day, snow swirling in chaotic sheets, the wind biting through layers of clothing. I tried to cry out, to plead, to make them see reason, but the cold drowned my voice. My fingers and toes went numb almost instantly, and panic began to set in. I realized in horror that they weren't just careless, they wanted me gone, wanted me to feel the helplessness they so casually dismissed inside. I felt completely alone, abandoned in a world that suddenly seemed too cruel to exist. As I sat there in the freezing storm, I thought about every moment that had led to this point. I remembered the sacrifices I had made, the dreams I had put on hold, and the unwavering love I had once believed they felt for me. Anger bubbled up beneath the fear. How could they think that someone as determined as me would simply succumb to their cruelty? How could they not know that appearances are often deceiving? I had been silent, underestimated, dismissed, but I had resources they couldn't even imagine. What they didn't know was that I had quietly amassed a fortune over the years, $101 million in assets that no one in my family, or my husband's family, ever suspected. I had been careful, meticulous, planning for the future in ways that allowed me to be independent no matter what life threw at me. While they assumed my paralysis meant dependency, I held the power of choice in ways they could never grasp. And that power was about to be revealed. The first step was survival. I focused on the cold, the snow, the wind, and the urgency of moving before frostbite claimed my limbs. I used every ounce of training and resilience I had to maneuver the wheelchair back toward the house, relying on sheer willpower more than strength. My mind raced, planning the moment of reckoning, imagining the shock on their faces when they realized that the helpless woman they tried to discard was the very one holding the key to unimaginable wealth. Once inside, I confronted them. My voice, though trembling from cold and adrenaline, was steady and filled with an authority they had never seen in me before. I revealed my assets, my accounts, my investments, and the control I had over every penny. The room went silent. My husband froze, his face a mixture of disbelief and guilt, while his family paled, struggling to comprehend that the person they thought was powerless had, in reality, been in full control the entire time. It wasn't just about money, it was about respect, dignity, and proving that cruelty has consequences. They had assumed weakness equaled vulnerability, but they failed to understand that resilience often hides behind a quiet exterior. I made it clear that any further attempts to manipulate or belittle me would result in permanent estrangement and financial separation. I didn't need revenge, I needed recognition that I was not to be underestimated, that I had survived the storm both literally and metaphorically, and that I could reclaim my life on my terms. That blizzard, which they thought would break me, instead became the catalyst for transformation. I emerged stronger, more self-assured, and fully in control. I had learned that power isn't always loud, and strength isn't always visible. While the snow left marks of its own, it couldn't touch the inner fire that had always defined me. By the time they realized their mistake, it was too late. They had underestimated me, and I had already rewritten the rules of our relationships. That day became a turning point, a moment of clarity, and a statement that I would never allow anyone to dictate my worth or dictate my life again. Being paralyzed had already forced me to redefine my life in ways I never anticipated, but nothing prepared me for the betrayal that came from the people I once called family. My husband's family, the ones I had trusted and believed would stand by me through thick and thin, revealed their true colors in the coldest, cruelest way imaginable. They didn't see me as a human being who needed support, they saw me as a liability, a burden, someone whose misfortune could somehow serve their selfish purposes. The day it happened, I was still adjusting to the reality of my condition, learning to navigate life from a wheelchair, relying on others for tasks I once took for granted. My husband avoided eye contact, and his family's smiles were hollow, laced with resentment disguised as concern. They talked behind closed doors, and I could hear snatches of conversations about expenses and inconveniences, as if my life had become a cost to be calculated rather than a person to be cherished. I tried to ignore it, hoping that perhaps they would soften with time, but the tension grew unbearable. Then came the winter storm. It hit suddenly, a fierce blizzard that turned the world white and chaotic. I was indoors, trying to stay warm, when they decided that my presence had become too much to tolerate. My husband didn't stop them, he stood aside as his family made a horrifying decision. They physically lifted me from my chair, bundled me up in blankets, and carried me out into the storm. The cold hit me like a wall, biting into my skin, numbing my limbs, and threatening to overwhelm me. I shouted, begged, pleaded, but the wind carried my voice away, and my protests were met with indifference. They didn't see fear, they didn't see a human being, they saw only an inconvenience to discard. Sitting in the freezing snow, I felt the weight of betrayal crush me more than the cold ever could. They thought I was helpless, thought that my paralysis rendered me powerless. For a moment, I felt despair creeping in, the kind that whispers you are alone in the world and no one can be trusted. But beneath that fear was a spark, a fire they had never expected to find. What they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that I was far from powerless. While they assumed weakness, I had quietly built a life that no one could take from me. I had $101 million in assets, carefully protected and hidden from anyone who might try to control or manipulate me. The realization of my fortune didn't bring immediate relief, but it gave me a plan, a sense of empowerment that they had tried to strip away. I focused on survival. First, navigating the snow and cold back toward the house, using every bit of determination I had. Each movement was a reminder that I was not broken, that I could endure more than they had imagined. The blizzard became a test, a trial that I would pass not just physically but emotionally and mentally. By the time I reached the door, soaked and shivering, I felt a shift within me. I was no longer the person they could intimidate with cruelty. Inside, I confronted them with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. I revealed the truth about my finances, my assets, and my control over resources they had assumed I would never possess. Shock rippled through the room. My husband looked as though he had seen a ghost, a mixture of guilt, disbelief, and fear etched across his face. His family, the ones who had tried to discard me, went pale, unable to comprehend that the person they had tried to harm was now the one holding power over them. The dynamic had shifted completely, and in that moment, I understood the full measure of my strength. It wasn't about vengeance. I wasn't interested in punishing them beyond what their own consciences would do. It was about asserting my dignity, reclaiming my agency, and proving that cruelty has consequences. I made it clear that any further mistreatment would lead to permanent estrangement and financial separation. I didn't need to strike back, simply asserting my position and exposing the truth was enough to change the balance. They had underestimated me at their own peril, and I would never allow that to happen again. The blizzard, the cold, the betrayal, they all became symbols of resilience rather than despair. I realized that power is not always loud or visible, and strength can be quiet, hidden beneath layers of patience and strategy. The very moment they thought they had defeated me became the turning point in my life. I had survived not only the physical storm but also the emotional one, emerging stronger, more self-assured, and in full control of my destiny. From that day forward, nothing would ever be the same. I set boundaries, reclaimed my independence, and ensured that my life could never again be dictated by anyone else's cruelty. The lesson was clear: underestimate me, and you will learn the hard way that strength is not always where it appears to be. The blizzard had tested me, but it also revealed the truth of who I was: unshakable, resourceful, and entirely capable of turning betrayal into triumph.